How does one learn how to remote view? Well, I am self-taught. I've never had an actual teacher, which is good news for you because it means that you can learn on your own and at your own pace. With remote viewing, there's typically two directions that you can go for learning. You can either have a teacher, which to be clear, I absolutely am not because I've only been doing this for about 3 years. You can have a teacher, which is the more expensive route, but you'll get results much faster and much better. So if you can afford that, I'd recommend you do that. However, if you're just starting out, you can start learning absolutely for free. And I am going to walk you through that process and give you some foundational concepts for remote viewing so that you can move forward with that. So what does remote viewing involve? Nothing more than a pad of paper and a pen and time. If you're going the less expensive route where you're teaching yourself, it's going to cost you less, but what it will take up a lot of is your time. So I would recommend you don't look into learning this unless you're willing to give it some time for lots of practice. I would ask that you be open to making mistakes constantly and self-improving and self-reflecting. Another thing to be said is that remote viewing, I don't necessarily think that that's the best term for it anymore. Remote viewing was coined by Ingo Swann, one of the early founders of the work of it. However, it might be more accurate to call it remote sensing or remote intuition. Because really what remote viewing is, it's a very kinesthetic process. It's not necessarily seeing something at all. Sometimes you'll remote view a target and you'll hear things. You'll smell things, you'll taste things, you'll feel things, you'll feel heat or the absence of heat. You will have an emotional impact or an aesthetic impact based on how you feel about being at the target. So it's all of these things. A good example would be if I took you blindfolded, let's say to a carnival, and I put noise canceling headphones on your ears and I took you to this carnival and you had no senses that could sense anything. And then I slowly began to remove different things, whether it be the blindfold or the noise canceling headphones, to where your senses very slowly started to sense things. Remote viewing is, unless you're years down the road of training, if you're getting video or images in your mind that are crystal clear, follow a narrative, follow a logical timeline, and are easy to see, that's probably just imagination. And that's good to know. And when that happens, you can use that to better your work by comparing it to what remote viewing typically is, which is, again, going back to the carnival example, if you were in a carnival and let's say the noise canceling headphones started to slowly be taken off of your ears, it would be sort of difficult to understand what you're hearing. There's probably a lot going on. So your sense would be very vague at first. You can think of the aperture in a camera. It's going to start very simply. So if I took the headphone off at a carnival, what's the first thing I would say? Noisy, right? So you start with the target this close to the gun that you're aiming at, right? You're just looking for very basic things. You're looking for it's noisy or it's quiet, right? And then it's a progression of steps moving the target just a little further away every time. So from there, peeking it off, you might say, all right, it's noisy. Laughter, I hear laughter. Or you might say, it's just noisy. So one thing I'll recommend to you is to open the aperture of remote sensing slower than you're comfortable with doing. Everyone who does this, because we all have egos, including myself, want to start out doing an amazing job and doing a perfect job, right? However, I encourage you to shoot for the very basic things when you're trying to sense something. Don't try to get the whole picture right away, although if you do, that's great. Start simple and celebrate the small wins, and also celebrate the small losses too, because they're what are going to drive you towards becoming a better remote viewer. In my opinion, remote viewing is a process similar to evidential mediumship in that it requires a lot of trust and patience. So going back to the carnival analogy, you might be locked in on the auditory value data of a target, but then that stops. Okay, well, don't force it. Remote viewing, as well as much other psychic work, is very dependent upon receiving instead of willing, right? I think we have this misnomer in our culture of let's say a wizard, for example. A wizard casts something, it's powerful because of its will. But in reality, the greatest intuition is simply being a quiet, open vessel that can receive it without judging it and without trying to connect the dots between other things. So if I told you that you're at a carnival up front and I want you to remote view information about the carnival, your left brain, your analytical mind, is probably going to make up things and have you imagine them to make it fit in what a carnival should be. Now, here's another key tenet to remote viewing. You should remote view absolutely blind to what it is that you're remote viewing, because I know it's counterintuitive, but this will actually give you more accuracy and precision with your remote viewing. If you don't know what you're viewing, your left brain, your ego, has no thread to pull on to try to get you on a narrative that makes sense. Your right brain, your creative subconscious brain will actually be able to tune into that which you're remote viewing, which will give you much more accuracy. Now, a couple more quick things before we dive into the first actual practice target in remote viewing. Remote viewing is you simply sitting calmly and quietly in a space where you're undisturbed for a time, and a target has been predetermined. Now, this is called tasking. Typically, somebody else tasks the target and then gives you a series of random numbers that are associated with that target. However, most of us don't necessarily have someone that can task for us. So if you're starting out, I'd recommend, and I'll put some website links here, I'd recommend that you start with practice targets that have been pre-made and pre-tasked by teachers and people who are actually more experienced in this field. You'll simply go to that website, see the random 8-digit numbers, and you'll get your sheet of paper and write down target, whatever the numbers are, and then from there starts your remote viewing process. Now, if you would like to self-task, that's completely possible. I do it all the time. For me, I've taken 50 different targets that I want to remote view that I'm curious about, and I have typed up their tasking. For example, let's just state one. The remote viewer will move to the optimum position and location to remote view the Roswell, New Mexico crash from the perspective of the beings piloting the craft. The remote viewer will ignore any and all myth, opinion, or made-up fantasy regarding this target. The target number is, and then you put your target number. That's tasking. That's a very simple version of tasking. It can get much more in depth, but let's just start with that. So you've gone to a practice website. Remoteviewed.com is an excellent website to start at. That's run and owned by Daz Smith, one of the foremost remote viewers in the world. He has practice targets on that site. All you're going to do, you're going to sit down and you're going to calm your mind. This doesn't require an hour of meditation, but simply sit still with your eyes closed and just sort of cool down. Just rest your mind. For some people, this takes 3 minutes. For others, it takes maybe 15. You'll know when you're at a state where you're open to receive, where you've sort of gone below the surface of your alpha brainwave state of constant thoughts. You might follow your breath. You might notice the sensation of the air coming and going out of your nose as you're breathing while sitting there. You'll intuitively know when you've come to a space that's still enough to remote view. Last thing, before you start remote viewing your first target, and any target, even if you're seeing this 20 years after remote viewing and you've come back to this, hold no expectation for accuracy. Do it for fun, do it for growth, and do it for learning. When you're reaching and striving and have an expectation, again, that involves the egoic left brain. If you can let go of that and simply before you start your session, maybe say to yourself or have the intention of, I'm simply doing this for enjoyment and exploration because I want to learn. I'm open to failure, as every failure eventually leads to great success, right? So you're in the right mindset for this, and you should start there. So you have your target, you have your piece of paper, your pen, you're in an undisturbed space, and you're calm. Now, because I'm just a student and I'm self-taught, I will give you options instead of telling you which path to take. For me personally, I am not yet good at remote viewing quickly until my aperture has opened up later in the session. At that point, I'm pretty fast. But early on, I find that I simply sit in meditation and I wait. And this will take practice, but you will feel an impulse. The impulse will simply be a fuzzy, for me it's typically visual, and it usually is in the center of my field of vision. But it'll be a fuzzy outline, or for some people it'll be just kind of a fuzzy feeling, but it will be unique and it will not be created. It will simply come of its own timing and volition. All right, so the way that we format this, up here you want to put the date, your initials if you want, and a column on the side. This is going to be a column. This is your box where you can put a short description of things that your left brain thinks that it is, and we'll get to that in a minute, but for now I'm just going to label this breaks. Over here is your target number. Target number. This is just made up. 7245960. Now, right after doing the last number, you're just going to draw a little squiggle. In remote viewing, this is known as an ideogram. Now, for some viewers, ideograms, the specific shapes within this little doodle, have a meaning. For me, they don't. I used to do it the way where each shape in the squiggle had a meaning, but I don't anymore because my mind would get too hung up on trying to draw those shapes in the moment. But what you really want is just to free flow the ideogram. Now in your subconscious, this ideogram represents whatever this target is. So I'm going to give you two ways to go about this. The first way is the way that I learned, but that I don't follow, and that is your ideogram has different shapes that comprise it. So if this was a life form, you might draw a little upward sort of loop. If this is man-made, you typically draw a hard 90-degree angle. Water. So it's pretty intuitive, right? But what I found was that in the moment after I had written my number, I would focus too much on what I was doing in the moment. So I don't pay attention to the shapes, and I simply later probe the line of the ideogram that I made for information. It's your choice. I find personally that not creating meanings out of ideograms helps me the most, but you do what's best for you. So now that we have our ideogram, let's do one more. Remember, the shapes of the line mean absolutely nothing, but what we're going to do, here we're beginning to open our aperture extremely slowly. Imagine you're just getting the very basic things, and we want to keep our left brain busy, so I'm just going to put A. A is simply going to be what I see the line is doing, so it moves down. I'm keeping my left brain busy because our left brain wants to have control of things, so we pretend that we give it a little control. So down, across, down. Oh, the left brain is so important. Look at it writing on the paper. Such a big, beautiful left brain. Good left brain. Down. All right, we've placated our left brain. Now we're just going to set our pen or fingertip anywhere on the line that you like. Let's start here. And we're just probing for basic information. Again, now there's two paths for this. My path, which is also known as the incorrect way, is to take my time and only write down once I feel an impulse of something. But in traditional remote viewing, in operational remote viewing, such as from the military, they would have you simply touch the dot, and a moment later you'd write down your very first impression that comes to you. Touch the dot. Touch the dot. Touch the dot. And you can keep doing this. You can keep going 7245-9640. A. The line goes across. Good left brain. Good. Wow, such a smart left brain. Oh, it goes down. Ooh, good job, left brain. And then it goes across again. Wow, so good at this left brain. Then it loops back. Wow, loops back. Now, you're not saying this out loud. I'm just sort of being a snot, and making fun of my left brain. Loops around and down and down. Wow. Good job, left brain. All right, now I'm just probe. What do I get? Okay, wet. Wood. Alive. Old. That's stage one. Good job. You've just completed stage one. We've opened our aperture barely at all. We're letting just a little bit of light in through our psychic camera, so to speak. This is a great first place to start. You can do these over and over and over again until you feel like you're kind of connecting more and more with the target. I want to say something else. While you're doing this, you might get words that don't make sense together. That's great. Remember, you could be remote viewing absolutely anything in the world. You could be remote viewing a single molecule that makes up iron. You could be remote viewing a rock on the moon. You could be remote viewing a thought. You could be remote viewing anything. So when you see things that don't connect and they don't make sense, especially at first, that's fine. All right, now this is just an example from another target I did a while back. This is stage two. Stage two, again, you label it with your target number, and you can begin with any of the basic senses. Here I started with what I was hearing. I labeled it audio. Now I underline targets where I feel a very strong impulse with it, and where they're not necessarily connected. This will take practice, but it's a special kind of feeling, and you'll know it when you feel it eventually. Now, what I heard echo, wind, stream, quiet, touch, airy, open, spiky, sharp, every 20 feet or so, natural growth. And over here under the brakes, I didn't get a chance to explain this earlier. The brakes column is what your left brain thinks it is, right? So you want to start with your aperture very small, and eventually you'll funnel it open. But in the brakes is where we give our left brain the chance to say what it needs to say, so it'll shut up, right? So as I'm writing this stuff, like for example, visuals, boulder, large, orange, natural, I can't even make that out. I began to write things like, oh, it seems like a fire, crackling, desert, old wood, and so on. So the brakes is your repository where you can placate your left brain and let it put its egoic, oh, I'm so good, look, I know already what it is, it's a desert, right? But the point of remote viewing is to describe, not interpret. The point of remote viewing is to experience and write down, but not determine what it is until much, much later. All right, so stage 2 continues going audio, touch, temperature, visuals, colors, taste, smells, energies, dimensionals, my own feelings. So let me explain a couple of these. So visuals are pretty self-explanatory. Again, keep your aperture small. So visuals, I saw something large and orange, natural. Colors, sunset colors, broad open horizon, panoramic view, blue, red, green, mandala of color, man-made. So let's just pause right here. So colors and visuals. These, because I've only been doing this 3 years at the time of this video, are this paragraph between visuals and colors probably took me somewhere between a minute to 5 minutes. Really good remote viewers years down the road would probably get this within less than 30 seconds. Right? So that's what you're aiming towards. But in the beginning, for me, I find going slow and only writing down when I feel that impulse, I have better accuracy. But eventually I want to speed up, and most remote viewers do. Taste, you can literally open your mouth and stick your tongue out in the air. Smells, same thing. You can imagine your spirit body as smelling the air wherever it is that you're at. Energies, this can be anything. This can be thermal energies like heat. This can be light. In this particular case, it was. Energies can also be, so let's say you were sensing a flowing stream. Instead of saying flowing stream, you might say energy is simply water or movement, right? Keep it basic. The less you can describe, the better early on. Dimensionals, steep drop, canyon. See, I probably should have put that right there. How do I feel about this place? Peaceful, quiet. I can't read that word. Old, long periods of rest. And what's interesting is the deeper you go into your aperture of remote viewing, for me personally, I find my handwriting gets much worse. I stop being able to spell words correctly because I'm more in my right brain. Stage 3 is simply visuals. Again, you'll write your target in the corner. You have your breaks column. Now here, for me personally, takes the most time. I'm really waiting, sometimes up to 5 or 10 minutes between images. I'm not going to draw everything that comes in. I'm just going to draw what comes in sort of a fuzzy, undefined, unclear way, and that has an impulse to it, a feeling to it of importance. You can do this for some time. You can also self-task while you're in stage 3. So move to optimum location to absorb historical focal point of the target. Now, another thing you can do is to continuously keep cueing your subconscious with the target. So here I wrote 7294. Okay, so it re-brings you to that space to draw it. And you can stay in each stage as long as you want, as long as you want. Now, this is one of my favorite stages. Daz Smith teaches this in his form of remote viewing called Flow, F-L-O-W. I recommend you Google that. He has a free PDF that you can download and use. Again, this is made up, but mind map, target, all right, and then you wait for your impulse, first impulse. I'm just going to start in the center of the page with a word that feels appropriate. Dark, dark, cool. Dark, stay with that feeling, dark. What's the next impulse I get from that? Oh, I get the word old, old. Now you can stay with either dark or you can keep going with old. I like to create rabbit holes from rabbit holes and then explore the data. So I'm going to keep on this one for a minute. Old, old, wooden. Now remember, you're not going for what your left brain wants. Wooden chair, wooden bridge. Keep it basic, keep it simple. Wooden. Something is dark, old, and wooden. Great, let's stay with wooden. Wooden, wooden, dusty, dusty, dusty. Inside, inside. Now, I say house. Normally that would go in a breaks column over here. House. However, the impulse felt right because I could see it, I could feel it. Do I want to stay on house? Let's do one more house. Ancestors. Ancestors, cool. Ooh, that's interesting. Let's go into that. Ancestors. Oh, I'm getting nothing. Should I keep pushing hard? Should I will it forward? No, that's fine. Just stop, rest. Hell, you can even take a break and come back to remote viewing at any time. Literally, I've had sessions that lasted months because I only had a half an hour every weekend to devote to it. So if that's the case, you'd simply put break, 8:05 a.m. or whatever. And then when you start again, you put start, 8:05, 10:15 a.m. or whatever. All right, so I felt a natural break here, so I'm stopping. Great, I'm just gonna stop, cool. Let's go back up to dark. Is there anything? Target, dark. Where are we going from dark? Haunted. Ooh, fun. Haunted. Haunted movie. Movie. Again, this might go in breaks. Break. Movie. Movie. See, my right brain's already having a hard time writing. Movie. 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 Nothing. So I pause there. I respect it and I pull back. Let's go down a different rabbit hole. Dark. Night. Night. Moon. 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 It ends there. So you can pick any one of these and go back to it. Let's play with wooden. Wooden. Target. Target. Da, 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 da. Wooden. Spoon. Spoon. Target. So da, 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 whatever the numbers are. Spoon. Spoon for target. Wall. Wall. Doesn't make sense, but you put it anyway. Great. Wall. Target. No, 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 no. Wall. White. White. Plaster. 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 Cool, and you can keep mind mapping as long as you want until you feel satisfied. And you can create rabbit holes down each of these words to your own liking. So your aperture is pretty open at this point, and you're going to start getting more complex shapes, more complex visuals, more complex things. Again, just like before, just experience it and view it, but don't interpret it. Describe what you're seeing, but don't put it into a box. Don't categorize it. Let it stay open. Spend as much time as you want. Typical remote viewing sessions last anywhere from, I guess, an hour if you're in a rush, to upwards of 20 hours, depending upon how much time you have for the target. At some point, when you feel that you're done and you can't seem to get more data, you're simply going to end your session and you're going to write down everything that you feel that it is. This is important for two reasons. If this were operational, let's say for the US military or something like that, at the end, when you're writing down your results of what you feel that it is, that's the time when you can sort of merge your left brain and right brain to write down what it is that you feel you've been viewing. You can actually wager a guess. Oh, this was the Eiffel Tower or whatever. You may even find that while you're busy writing down your few paragraphs of your summary of what this is, even more stuff starts flooding in. That's great. Go ahead and let it. Your aperture is extremely open at this point. All of these details might come rushing in. Now, when you're done and you're completely finished, you write end and the time. And that tells your subconscious, okay, this is over. Set your pen down. Some people even set their pen down into the exact same spot every time. When you have time, you're going to actually click the link for the random numbers and find out what it is that you viewed now that you're done, because you were blind to it the whole time. This is key because it trains your subconscious on what it did and what it did not get right. I want you to go back page by page, word by word, and look at what you wrote and remember how you felt when the right impulses of data came in and when the wrong impulses of data came in. That is the key. Doing that for days, months, years, over and over and over again, you're going to get really good at parsing out, oh, I felt this way when that star shape came in, but I felt this way when that shape came in, and this way was wrong. I'm going to lean more towards this kind of impulse. And that's where you can begin to map out what works for you specifically. Each student is different. Each mind is different. So I hope that helps. One final thought. Be open to making mistakes. Do not expect perfection right out of the gate. Do this for fun. I personally enjoy doing this. Sometimes I would miss, sometimes I'd have a hit, but what it taught me was that by being able to sense something that's only associated with random numbers goes well beyond the chance of any statistical probability of somehow accidentally viewing the thing that the target is, which for me excited me greatly because as a skeptic at that time, it proved to me that there is something beyond this reality and beyond this construct. What that is, I don't know, but remote viewing is a way into it. And I don't know about you, but for me, it proves the existence of things that are greater and far beyond this reality. That's why I keep going and using it. Finally, I would recommend that you intentionally do not remote view military targets or targets where you know that you normally would not be allowed to view. It is unethical to view a person. It is unethical to sense someone who hasn't given you consent to sense something about them. Don't go out viewing military targets or targets where you know you wouldn't be invited simply because it's just not a good idea. Just trust me. And have fun. Let me know if you have any questions.